Okay, so let's get started with the first session of the day. It's my pleasure today to introduce our first speaker, Romuald Ali. Romuald is a research scientist at DeepMind and associate professor of applied mathematics at University Gustav Eiffel. He has previously held positions at ETH Zurich, University Paris Dauphine, University of Michigan, UC Santa Barbara, UC Berkeley, and Google Brain. Romuald's research interests lie at the intersection of dynamic programming, optimal decision-making, machine learning, and game theory. Some of his key contributions include the construction of efficient Monte Carlo methods for the resolution of complex planning problems, the design of optimal incentives rewards in imperfect information games, and the study of learning mechanisms in mean field games. Today, Romuald will be presenting work on the topic of mean field learning with infinitely many agents. So thank you very much again, Romuald, for presenting today. The floor is all yours.
Thanks a lot, Shaigan, for the very nice introduction for the invitation. It's great. I'm very happy to be here and to be here virtually, of course. So I will be mainly talking about mean field games. So how can we learn some Nash equilibrium in a game with so many agents that we prefer, considering that there is an infinity of them, because it helps a lot. And so let's say that the main purpose somehow of this talk is to get people more familiar with mean field games. So I hope you'll feel free to interrupt me if you have questions about this. Okay, the purpose is really to focus on this notion that I believe interesting for optimization in a multi-agent setting. So what are the main motivations here? So as you know, when we want to go from single agent to multi-agent settings, it gets more difficult to learn how to do appropriate tasks, how to learn to synchronize, and these kind of things. And so typically the approach that we tend to use in these settings do not scale with the number of agents. At some point, we are not really able to deal with too many agents at the same time. And so the idea we had, and we started working on this around 2 years ago now, is to try to mix ideas coming from reinforcement learning and ideas coming from mean field games to see how this can help to learn some equilibrium, some Nash equilibrium in multi-agent settings with a lot of agents. So the idea of mean field games is to consider that you are so many agents and that you should consider the population as a whole, and you should think of your decisions as interactions with the population. And so we'll see how we do that. So first, I will try to do a quick primer on mean field games to show you where they come from and how they can be helpful and how they correspond to limits of multiplayer games. Then I will focus on one example just to give a flavor of the kind of things we can do with it, which is going to be taken from Control of Epidemic Dynamics, which is a timely topic. And then I will focus on the learning questions. So so let's first focus on this notion of mean field games. So in order to set up a couple of notations, so let's first consider here a multiplayer games with a number of players, which is big N, and consider that each player is going to choose his own control, which is alpha I. So player I chooses alpha I, and he wants to optimize his reward, and his reward is given as a function of the strategies of all the other players. So if you are in this case, well, you are in a multiplayer game, okay, with possibly a lot of players. And as you know, of course, you get a Nash equilibrium when you get a collections of optimal strategies, such as for each of the players deviating from this strategy if the other don't is not optimal. This is just what is written here. So what's happening now if I want to let the number of players go to infinity to try to understand what can happen? Well, in which cases this can be relevant? Well, an example I will try to keep in mind all along this presentation of mean field games is an example of modeling, let's say, traffic jam, how people choose to drive their car in a traffic. Okay, so let's say in this case that X is your position. So you are agent I, XI is your position. okay, as agent I, and then you will choose a control alpha I, which says, let's say, how quickly you drive and in which direction you go on the network. Okay, and of course, how quickly you can go depends on the traffic jam you see, and so the traffic jam you see is given by the positions of everybody. But of course, if you are in a traffic jam somehow and there is a car in front of you, well, you don't really care if it's agent number 20, 47, or 126, which is in front of you. What is important is just know that there is someone here, and so that you're blocked, you cannot go as fast as you would like. Okay, so clearly, this is a setting of, let's say, anonymous players. Well, where what is going to be important somehow is the distribution of the cars on the road network. Okay, so what is going to be important for you to take your decisions is to anticipate what is going to be this flow of cars on the road network. Okay, and so the main idea for Minfield Games is the following: is to say it comes from applications in economics as first, where in economics usually, well, the topics which are well understood are the ones which are either on a microscopic level, where you look at economic agents and try to decide how they take their decisions, or you look at things at a macroscopic scale, where you look at a problem of macroeconomic nature. Okay, and the question is, how do you go from these microscopic decisions to macroscopic movements? And the idea of Minfield Games, let's say, it's to try to get some flavor of what we can get. So in terms of applications, yeah, so I mentioned the traffic jam, which is quite natural. I will talk about it again. We'll talk about vaccination, epidemic modeling, which is also a topic which is present in the Minfield game literature, which appeared maybe 5 or 6 years ago. There are a couple of, let's say, toy examples, which I believe also helpful to understand how Minfield games work. And one of them is the so-called Mexican wave. So in a stadium, well, you could consider that each of the individual needs to take a decision. So let's say there is a Mexican wave coming close by, and you need to decide if you want to stand up, okay, or to sit down. Okay, so my control is to be somewhere in between being down or up. Okay, this is my choice. And of course, well, maybe I'm a bit lazy to stand up. And in particular, I don't want to stand up if nobody stands up. So then you see that when I take my decision, it depends on the decision of everybody, okay, on the whole population. But at the same time, this is the aggregation of the decisions of everybody, which is going to create or not a Mexican wave here in the stadium. So this is typically this kind of idea that we'll find in these examples. There are some examples in the literature as well in terms of bird or animal flocking, okay, where each animal takes decision and you look at how the crowd of animals moved in the air. In terms of crowd modeling, we can find things as well. There are applications in energy management. There are applications in finance as well, because when you take decisions, let's say to invest or not in a given stock, well, you do this depending on what are your anticipations of what the stock is going to do. But this is the aggregation of all the anticipations, which then drives the stock value. So you see this balancing between the two. And so the idea of Minfield games somehow is to consider that, well, if you are in a game where all the agents are somehow identical, well, you can focus on a representative agent and try to find how this representative agent should behave with respect to what the population is doing. So this is clearly the main idea which is here. So it means that if I have an n-player game with n players, okay, then the way I'm going to write the problem for player number I is typically the following. I want to optimize over the control alpha I what is the expectation of the sum of the rewards of where the car is. Let's think about cars, where the car is, what is the traffic jam. So the traffic jam is given by x1, xn, where all the cars are located, okay, plus the control. So you take a decision alpha, which is going to make your car move. So your car is going to move according, let's say, to the dynamics which is here. And you want to optimize this. Now, if you think that all the people are identical, okay, instead of focusing on agent number I, you could pick any agent. So if you pick any agent and all the agents are the same, well, what's happening in the writing here is that, well, you take any agent, a representative one, and now the positions of all the agents, the empirical distributions of the car on the road, is just replaced by the distribution of the cars on the road, which is a distribution of xt. So somehow you are controlling now a Markov decision process, which is x, but you see that in the dynamics of x, well, the distribution of x is showing up. Okay, so mathematically speaking, it means that in the dynamics of the MDP, you have the distribution of x, which arises as well. And so in order to solve this kind of problem, you will have to work a bit more and not consider x alone, but both x and his distribution, namely your car position and the traffic jam flow. Okay, so it's just in terms of writing. So what do we need to be in, let's say, the classical framework on mean-field games, which has been so first introduced around 15 years ago. And then there have been a bit of generalization, but in the classical framework, well, you are not interested, as I was saying, on which car is where, but you're interested in the population of the cars, okay? So the players needs to be anonymous. You don't care about who is who. They must be somehow identical, because you are going to focus on a representative player, okay? So they need to have a lot of similarities. So typically, same structure of reward, and maybe also same risk preferences, or this kind of things, at least in the classical setting. And so somehow what makes things easier in this mean-field game setting is that it's somehow easier to find Nash equilibrium in comparison to other games. So why is it easier? Well, first, because you are just one agent out of an infinity of them, well, you have no impact on what's happening yourself, okay? So think about the Mexican wave. Well, definitely it's not because you are standing up that is going to change anything. So because your impact is negligible, well, you cannot bluff the population because you don't have any impact on the population. So in this sense, it's going to be easier to find Nash equilibrium. Okay, and so somehow each agent is playing with or against all the possible himself, which can be in other positions and may want to do different things. And the very nice property of this kind of mean-field games is that if you find an optimal policy in this asymptotic game, in this mean-field game, and you plug it in the finite number of player game, you end up with an approximate Nash equilibrium. Okay, so if you're able to solve the asymptotic game, take the optimal solution and plug it in the game you started from, you are not too bad. You are an approximate Nash. So this is very interesting. And so, as I mentioned, well, you should not focus on X as an MDP because it's not a Markov chain. It depends on the distribution as well. But if you consider the couple X plus its distribution, well, here you have a Markov chain, and you should work in this setting to have dynamic programming and this kind of things. So how do we solve mean-field games in general using mathematical tools? Well, because we are considering the population of all the agents, okay? Well, instead, if you have, let's say, 1,000 agents, you don't have 1,000 dynamic programming for each of the agents. Okay, so you don't have one equation by agent, and you have 1,000 of them, like a couple system, very huge. Well, you end up with just 2 equations on which I will focus now. Okay, the first equation is just going to be, okay, what is going to be the optimal decision of the representative player with respect to the population dynamics. Okay, so it's just a dynamic programming, or Hamilton, Jacobi-Bellman if you are in continuous time, dynamic programming for one representative agent. So this is the first thing which tells you, okay, for a given flow of traffic jam, this is my optimal response. So the optimal response here is alpha star as a function of mu. So this is the first thing. And the second thing you need, well, you need to say, okay, so I want all the agents to act optimally in this setting. So they pick alpha star of mu if the traffic jam looks like mu. But besides, what I want as well is that when I look at the induced distribution of all the traffic of the cars, okay, which is given by this chosen policy, I end up with the traffic jam I started with, which is mu. Okay, you need a fixed point. So if the population plays mu, alpha star is going to be optimal. And if all the individuals play alpha star, then you must have mu as an output traffic jam. And so if you can find both alpha star and mu which satisfy this fixed point property, well, you found a Nash equilibrium. And so as you understand now, instead of focusing on all the interactions between all the I'll come back to this question. So instead of focusing to all the interactions between all the possible agents, you just focus on the interaction of a representative agent plus the population. And so on the question of what is B here in this dynamics, well, if you think about traffic jam, okay, so X is my position, xt plus 1 is my position in 1 minute, alpha is the effort or the speed I'm going to have, okay, and B of X mu alpha is saying how much traffic jam is going to be on my way to be able to go further. So this is so from a Markov decision process point of view, this is the drift of X. Okay, and the drift of X, usually when you have a classical Markov decision process, it only depends on X, but here it also depends on the mu, which is going to be the traffic jam that you have around. Does it make sense?
Yeah, I think so. So it's really a kind of like linear dynamic type of setup that you're considering here.
Well,
where B itself might be nonlinear, but then it's added to the current position.
Exactly, and it should be multiplied by dt. I should have put a dt here, which is equal to 1 in my writing. So it would be like xt plus 1 is xt plus the drift times dt plus a noise. So typically, let's say a Brownian motion if you're in continuous time or these kind of things.
I see. And is that is this particular form of the transition model in this case, is that critical to the analysis that you're going to be showing? Or could it be more generalized, you know, kind of like the normal formulations of MDPs with just stochastic transitions?
Well, I think you can encompass a lot of stochastic transitions in here with this writing here. So, so at least this is a classical way of writing the transition in continuous time. So now if you take MDP as a discrete time approximation of a continuous time process, you would still have quite a lot of things here. Now in the epsilon, you can put some stochasticity as well. So if you want to have more, if you want to have the equivalent of let's say, I don't know, a binomial tree or something, you put, let's say, a Brownian motion here in epsilon. So I think you can encompass a lot of your MDPs, but maybe it's not the usual writing you have.
Yeah, I think, well, in order to capture all general forms of stochasticity, certainly the noise should also be able to depend on the actions taken. But
yes.
Perhaps this is a bit of too much detail, and I don't want to completely interrupt your talk. But
no, thanks a lot. It's a good point. So something which is not really written here is that B should also depend on all the alpha, the actions of everybody. And so, and indeed, this is not the case in, let's say, the classical mean-field game writing, the first one which has been created. There has been some generalization since. So you cannot do anything, but you can adapt some dependence with respect to all the actions of everybody. Here you only see all the actions through the position somehow in this writing. But we can.
Thanks for sorry for the interruption.
Yeah, no, feel free. I mean, let's try to make this as interactive as we can. So thanks for the questions. So yeah, so the main story here somehow is that, well, you end up with two equations which characterize the solution of the game. So this kind of tools comes from the mathematical community, which said, okay, that's great. Instead of focusing on a couple of system of n equations, if I have n agents, I just need to have two equations, one for the population distribution flow, okay, and the other one which is just a dynamic programming one. And so if I can get a fixed point between the two, that's cool. I have my solution. So this is why it brought a lot of attention, let's say, in the game theory and as well in the analytical community, who had some nice partial differential equations to play with as well. So this is how you can solve a mean-field game. So in order to solve a mean-field game, you can either solve this system of equations or try to use more simulation methods or reinforcement learning-based method, and this is mainly what we will be focusing on. Okay, so I talked maybe already too much about mean-field games. There is another notion I want to present as well very quickly. In the literature, it's called mean-field control. And what we call mean-field control in the literature, well, it's a case where there is a global planner which decides for everybody. So this is a centralized decision-making. So instead of letting all the agents interact together and try to reach an equilibrium, there is someone which decides for everybody, and so can get Pareto optimal or these kind of things. And so this is what we call mean-field control in this literature, or control of Makin-Vlasov equations, if some of you are also familiar with this. And in this case, what you need to take into account, so there is one only global planner which chooses the alpha of everybody. So you need to take into account in your writing that you are going to move the distribution of X when you move alpha, because you're moving all the traffic jam at the same time. So a good idea to have in mind is that you'll be a global planner if you have, let's say, Waze, and 100% of the players are using the app. Okay, so you can also write equivalent equations in this mean-field control case. Well, because it's not a game, you don't need to go for a fixed point, but you can write dynamic programming on the full distribution and get some solutions as well, which can be interesting in itself. But I'll give an example a bit later. So this was, let's say, the classical mean-field game setting. There has been a bunch of generalizations since. One of them is to try to, well, the first one, which come back to the question I had a couple of minutes ago, which is to try to put the distribution of the control alpha as well in the dynamics. So not only the position of the players, but also their controls. So if you think about auctions, of course, this is what's happening, because then the action you take is how much you bet, and this is what is important at the end. Let's say for a second price option or these kind of things. Okay, there is a big literature about what they call adding a common noise to the picture. So what they call mean-field games with common noise is trying to build some correlation between the players. So if you have a noise for each player, which influences his decision or his movements, and when you add up a common noise, adding a common noise will bring some correlation between this. So on the financial markets, this common noise would correspond as a global representation of some macroeconomic feature, for example, which can influence a couple of stocks at the same time. Okay, if you think about, I don't know, moving birds, this can be the wind, which pushes in one direction or another, but which impacts everybody on this kind of things. Okay, there are also some games with different types of populations which interact together. I will give some example later. There are some games with big players and small players. They are called major, minor, and things like that. Well, I'm not sure I should go too much into the details, but just to tell you, there are some variations on this topic which are given. So what I would like to do now is to focus on one example, which is this epidemic dynamics example that I find interesting just to understand the notion more clearly. But before doing so, do you have some questions on this, let's say, short introduction to mean-field games? It could be a good timing if there are some short questions on this. And if Shagan is okay with that.
There are no questions from the audience. I actually have a question. Not sure how short it will be. So you mentioned earlier that the computational complexity of finding a Nash in mean-field games should be lower than finding it in finite games, let's say. Do you have a sense of, can you give us a sense of exactly what the differences there are? And likewise for things like correlated equilibria.
Yes. So okay. So very very good question. Thanks a lot. So well, technically, on the difficulty to find a Nash in a multiplayer game will grow up quite quickly with the number of players. Although when you focus on the midfield game, of course, it doesn't depend on the number of players anymore. It would be once again as if you interact with the population. So finding a Nash is not way much more difficult than dealing with a game with, let's say, maybe 2 or 3 or 4 players, I would say. So this is my feeling about it. Now about the notion of focusing on more intricate equilibria, like correlated equilibrium, where the notion of correlated equilibrium is not yet clearly understood and presented for midfield games. And this is in fact something we are working on it. But so yeah, we are not there yet, but hopefully in a couple of months.
Okay, thanks very much.
Yep. So maybe let's turn to this example, which is well, maybe everybody is fed up about hearing about epidemic dynamics. I don't know, but still, it's an example where I think you can clearly understand what's happening here. So this comes from a joint work done with Emma Hubert, which is now at Imperial College, and Gabriel Turinici, which is in Dauphine, in France. So let's take a classical now SIR model, which is the one you use to model the dynamics of epidemics. Okay, so you are going to model the epidemic dynamics by looking at 3 compartments: susceptibles, infected, and recovered, and people are going to move from one compartment to the other, and the epidemic dynamics is going to depend on how people move quickly or not from one compartment to the other. So the susceptible are the people who have not been infected, the infected are the people which are in fact infectious, and the recovered are the ones who are somehow immune, so they don't have any impact on the dynamics anymore. And so the classical model, which is now 100 years old for this kind of thing, is this SIR, where you have this kind of dynamics. Okay, so you have 2 parameters which are important, which is a beta bar here and the gamma. So beta bar here measures how often a susceptible and an infected get in contact in order to create a new infection. This is this coefficient beta bar here. And the gamma tells you how long you remain infectious before being recovered. Okay, so this is typically, so using compartmental models, of course, much more intricate than this one, is typically what is done to do some prediction of how the epidemics could evolve. And so this epidemic example is a good one because you can only see this as a game. Namely, you can think that each agent is going to choose his level of social interactions, which is beta, and the way he chooses his level of social interactions depends, of course, on the risks he would take. So it depends on the epidemic dynamics. This is the first equation. And the second equation is to say, yes, but when you take the optimal control of everybody and you aggregate all this together, you end up with the epidemic dynamics. So you see that the epidemic dynamics in this very toy and simple example can be seen as a result of a Nash equilibrium between all the players, if you consider that all the players are identical and so on. So you can make a model out of it. Okay, so this is first the classical dynamics you would have for an SIR if the level of social interactions beta remain constant within the population. Okay, so how do you read these graphs? Well, the interesting one are the blue one here, which is the number of susceptible. So you start from level 1, which is 100% of the population. And if the epidemic goes following these dynamics, you end up at the end with only 20% of the people which have not been infected here by the virus. This is in this example. The infected curve corresponds to the number of people which are infectious at the same time. Okay, so you have an epidemic peak here that you can see here, where in this example you reach 15% of the population. And the number of recovered, when you look at the end of the epidemics, it tells you, how long. So it tells you how many people have been infected. So if you end up at 80%, it means that at some point, well, 80% of the population has been infected. Okay, and of course, it's the dynamics where you keep your immunity. If you don't keep the immunity, well, you just go back from recovered to susceptible, and you can consider, of course, many different dynamics in here. When you use vaccination, you move people directly from susceptible to recovered, and this kind of things. So if you look at the dynamics and you want to build, let's say, a game out of it, well, what is tempting here is to say, okay, let's say that all the individuals are the same, which is of course a way too simple assumption. Each individual is going to choose his own contact rate with other individuals, which is the parameter beta here in the dynamics. So each individual is going to choose his own beta, and in this simple model, we just consider he chooses his beta depending on two things. First, the probability of getting infected, which is going to depend, of course, on the current level of infected people in the population, plus the social cost he has for reducing his contacts. Okay, and so you can write this as a game. Okay, and here you really see the game between each individual, or the representative individual, which chooses beta, and which plays against with the population, okay, whose choice is given here in notation beta bar. Okay, so it means that you want beta to be optimal with respect to the epidemic dynamics given by beta bar. This is the first thing. And the second thing, you want the epidemic dynamics beta bar to appear as the natural dynamics in terms of aggregating all the individual choices beta. So mathematically, the way you can write this is the following. Okay, for a given epidemic dynamics, which is the beta bar, which is here, you are going to, each individual is going to optimize the beta, the red beta here, okay, and he wants to minimize the cost, and the cost here is written as, well, it's just the sum of the cost he has until the infectious moment, which is a stopping time tau, okay, plus a given cost he has. So C of beta S is the cost for reducing his social interactions, and here the Ri is the cost he gets when he gets infected. And of course, this tau, which is the random time of infection, depends on the epidemic dynamics, so it depends on beta bar itself. Okay, so beta responds to beta bar, and so you end up with something which somehow, I mean, is a nice framework for mean field game or mean field control. Okay, and so finding a Nash equilibrium here, if you look on this equation, finding a Nash equilibrium corresponds to saying, okay, I want to find an optimal strategy beta star, such that, well, given the population strategy beta star, well, for any individual, it's optimal to play the red beta star. Okay, so because I minimize the cost, this is how you write the condition for the Nash equilibrium. And once again, you have two equations, and you can try to solve it. So you can do some numerical experiments on it. Okay, this is something that I present, let's say, right here. You can do some numerical experiments in this very simple, and once again, toy model. And so here on the right, I can see the optimal beta star we get for the Nash equilibrium. Okay, so the red one is what would have happened if everybody had kept, let's say, his level of contact interaction at the same level. And the optimal beta star in this, once again, very simple model looks like that. Well, you need to reduce it from a level of 0.2 to 0.13, and then you let it go up gradually, slowly like that. And what you see that, well, when you play the Nash, you are going to have an epidemic dynamics, which is given by the solid lines here. So in blue, you have the number of susceptibles. In red, the number of infected. And in green, the number of recovered. And you see that at the Nash, well, you see that the number of susceptible at the end is much higher. I mean, it's almost 40% instead of 20%. So it's a big difference in terms of number of people who got infected. You see that the peak of the infection is much smaller as well. Okay, and you see, well, here kind of similar information that the number of recovered at the end is quite similar. So this is a kind of NASH you would get in, once again, this very simple and toy model. You can do the same kind of things using constant by part beta. So instead of having a beta that I can choose continuously in between 0 and 1, I could say I have one shift and I get similar things, but I won't have time to discuss this now. And interestingly, you can also look at the same problem, but not from a mean field games perspective, but from a mean field control perspective. And say, okay, what would be the optimal beta if there was a global planner who could choose, let's say, the global level of social interactions for everybody at the same time. And so here you can measure the cost of anarchy, which is I believe interesting. So what you see here on the purple line, so the solid line is the optimal strategy for the Nash equilibrium, and the dotted one is the optimal strategy for the global planner for the mean field control. So you see it's a stronger effort which is made in terms of reduction of social interactions here in this simple model. You can see at the end that if you, for example, at the number of susceptible here, number of recovered, sorry, you see that it moves from more than 60% to around 55%. Okay, so you have a lot of people who didn't get infected if you play this Pareto optimal strategy, and once again, this is simple model. Okay, so you can solve the problem for mean field game, for mean field control, using the kind of equations I showed you, and try to do some numerical resolution of the corresponding partial differential equations using typically gradient descent or these kind of things. And if you do that, you can deal with examples like the one I showed, which is, once again, just a toy example. I just wanted to present because it really fits from my belief, the mean field game setting.
I just have a quick question, and
Yep.
For the mean field game part, I guess that the results are strongly dependent of how much you weigh the cost of social distancing versus the cost of being infected. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely.
Mm.
Yeah, definitely. There is a balance between the two, and so there is a balance between the two, which corresponds to choosing this Ri here in my equations, and definitely it changes a lot. So what's interesting somehow is to look at some Pareto front between the two, if you wonder what could be optimal, how you balance the two, and yeah, it's very dependent of this, of course.
Okay, but in the mean field control version, you look actually for the Pareto optimal solution, is that right?
In the mean field control, you have the same thing, same problem somehow. It's going to depend a lot on this as well. Here, I kept, of course, the same numerical numbers to show mean field control and mean field game on the same graph. But so on mean field control, so it's clear. You choose, so you see the cost function is a function of what the individual is doing, which is a red beta, and what the population is doing, which is a blue beta. So for the Nash, you need to find this beta star which satisfies the equation which is here, which says that if the population plays the blue beta star, well, the representative individual should play the red beta star. But if you look at mean field control, well, you just optimize this function as a function of two variables, and you pick the same beta for this. So mathematically, this is a difference in terms of writing in this simple example.
Okay.
But yeah, definitely it depends a lot on this. And once again, it's just a toy model to see a bit how it looks like. And
Okay, thanks.
are there any other questions? I will try to turn to learning in mean field games for my last part. So if you have some questions on this epidemic example, it's a good timing.
Hello. So thanks. Very interesting part. I have one question. So you said that there is no uniqueness result on the Nash equilibrium in this particular game, but how does it look from the point of numerical simulations? Does it seem to be unique? This one point that is proved via Schauder theorem.
Yes. Yeah. For this example, I'm pretty sure we have uniqueness. We have just not been able to get it, let's say. which is classical somehow in midfield games. So in midfield games, getting uniqueness is difficult. And there is a strong assumption, which is usually made on the reward function, which is called the monotonicity assumption. I will talk about it a bit later, which ensures uniqueness, but it's key in general in midfield games. So we don't have it here. And so I guess, yeah. So we did not have the mathematical argument to get it, but I'm pretty sure in this example we have uniqueness.
And do you expect some more complicated behavior, like in the talk of Yorkios Piliouras yesterday, like limit cycles or even chaos?
Well, I expect that, and the good news is that I started working with Georgios about these topics, so I hope we can get nice things about it. But
Cool.
I discussed with this for this exact reason. I want to understand what we can get in terms of cycle, how does this geometry of Nash looks like, and these kind of things. So we started working on it very recently. So let's hope it can give some results. So it's too early, but hopefully yes.
Awesome. Thanks.
So perhaps this is actually a follow-up question, I suppose, but I guess I'm just slightly confused where in the start of your talk, you said that these midfield games can be seen as special cases of MDPs. But now it seems actually that solving these midfield games, finding a Nash equilibrium, doesn't seem so trivial at all. In particular cases, you can employ particular fixed point theorems, etc., etc. But so it doesn't seem to be the case that you can use standard value iteration, say, to solve it.
So
can you clarify just a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I clearly went too quickly here. So the nice property I want to emphasize in this setting is that if you adopt the distribution as a state variable, you become Markovian. And so you can look at your dynamics as Markovian dynamics. So you can look at your dynamics as a classical MDP, which has two components, X and his distribution, and they have a joint dynamics. So you can have a time consistency, so you can write dynamic programming clearly, which is much more difficult to do if you don't have it. So it means that when you adopt this distribution as a state variable, things get much easier, but they mainly get much easier when you want to do midfield control, because then you say, okay, I have an MDP which has two components. I want to optimize over this MDP to do optimal control on it. So somehow, now that I see this MDP in a larger space, I'm much more comfortable with respect to the tools I usually use for this, except I need to optimize over a distribution, so it's harder than optimizing over a process, but somehow I'm more at ease for this. Now, if I want to get a Nash, I still need to get a fixed point at some point. So even if I understood that adding this as in the state variable helps, I still need to head for a Nash equilibrium. So I will need to use the tricks we usually use to get the Nash to avoid cycling or these kind of things. And typically, what the kind of algorithm we're going to be using are fictitious play, which are able to converge to Nash equilibria when you have games with a couple of players. So I'm saying it, yeah.
Yes. Okay. So if I understood you correctly, one of the main assumptions before was this additive notion. The fact that the state was being changed additively, and that's no longer the case here. Is that correct, or am I still missing it?
You mean additively for the dynamics like the one we have here, where I have xt plus 1, xt plus b.
Yeah. That's what I thought I heard.
Yeah, sure. Well, if you look at the first term here, which is this dst, well, you can see it as an additive term. So you have st plus, so if you write this in discrete time, st plus 1 is st plus a term times dt, and this term is going to depend on what the other people are doing, and I want to optimize over beta as well. So I think you would have a similar framework here with this writing, but maybe there is something I don't understand in the question here. So I would say that the case I look at here is in fact a particular case of the writing I had before.
Okay, yeah. So then I'm still not completely certain. I guess I'm just still a bit confused as to when something kind of reduces to an MDP, and when it is a fixed point problem that is
So,
more
so we
difficult.
need to, yeah, so we can focus on MDP when we do mean field control. So one global planner for everybody. And your MDP is in a larger space when you have two dimensions. The first dimension is the classical MDP, and the second one is the distribution of the MDP.
Yeah, makes sense.
So here you are classical MDP. If not, well, you still need to find a fixed point. You need to find a Nash. So it helps to understand that if you put mu in the distribution, things become dynamically consistent. But you still need to use this Nash equilibrium. And so the way you do it is I say, okay, let's say the population plays like this. What is optimal for me? And I go back and forth and I look for a fixed point and I try to converge to this. So in fact, you're playing as a representative player against the population.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Okay, I think I got it now. Thanks.
Sorry if I was not so clear, but I think
No problem.
So I come from the continuous time community as well. So usually I write everything with continuous time dynamics. So I think it doesn't help as well in terms of writing.
Yeah, there certainly is a notational gap between what you're showing and what I'm used to looking at. But I'm trying to hang on.
Thanks for your questions and your interest in this.
Ramiel, I just want to give a 15-minute heads up for this session.
Yeah. So yeah, let's hurry up a bit and talk about learning in these mean-field games. Once again, what I really wanted to know too is that you thought, okay, this can be interesting for the multi-agent settings to look at this infinite limit case and see what we can do with it. So these are joint works with people from DeepMind, Brain, University of Lille, Princeton, and Singapore as well. And you see Georgios is here as well, as we mentioned. And so maybe I just skip and go to the kind of results we got. So we used fictitious planar and mirror descent algorithms in this setting. Okay, so you look for a fixed point, and we try to get them using a fictitious planar and mirror descent. And let me, because I don't have much time, let me show you some numerical examples we got. Maybe I could take this one. So this is the one where you have crowd modeling example in a maze. So people are trying to move in the maze, and there is a huge reward in the middle. And what is important in the dynamics, and what I want to talk a bit about, is that, well, we consider that the reward at each state, okay, it's related to how close people are from the middle of the maze, first. And second, we want people to avoid being too close to each other. So namely, your reward is going to be less important if you are in the middle of the crowd. So this is something which is measured here in terms of minus log of mu of x. So if you are at position x, then the quantity of people at your position is mu of x. And you have this minus log of mu of x, which shows up into the picture, which tells you that, well, you don't feel comfortable if you are too many people around. And the thing I want to emphasize is that having this kind of term in the reward, so having a reward which is such that people want to expand on the space, is a kind of condition which is going to give us uniqueness of Nash. Okay, so when I told you a bit before, I need to have some conditions to be able to get the Nash, and one classical one is the monotonicity condition, which is the one where what we call monotonicity condition is exactly this one. So it means people want to expand. They won't be very happy so if you have a strong population close to you, your reward is getting slower. You need this kind of feature to have a uniqueness of Nash, and this is how we can get convergence. This is, let me maybe show this one. So this is an example where you have a building evacuation. So you have to think that all the population is on the last floor here and want to go down. And to go down, it needs to follow my pointer because there are some stairs. So you need to move in all the floors to go down. And this is how the dynamics would look like. So on the lower right corner, you have the first floor where everybody is finishing, and people are going from everywhere in the building to this last floor. So it's an evacuation of building that we can model this way with a toy model of the type of the one I was presenting, to model how people can be I mean, what can be the frictions when people try to move inside the building. Maybe another example here, it's an example where you have several populations which are chasing each other. So you have 4 populations which start in the 4 corners of the square here, and they are chasing each other. So if you have some, so how does it work at the end? Well, you will see the 4 populations. So what is going to be interesting at the end is the distribution of the population. So what we get and a nice output is the distribution. So here we have 4 populations. So we have 4 distributions. We all have their own dynamics. And as you can see, they are connected at the Nash equilibrium. Okay, you are, and it's an approximate Nash because it's approximated numerically. But we are able to converge to this approximate Nash equilibrium. And something I should emphasize is that, so I believe using min-field games can be interesting for the multi-agent community because it helps dealing with systems with lots of agents, and you can get some interesting output. But as well, while using a reinforcement learning type algorithm for this kind of min-field game, is very interesting for the min-field game community because they are not able to solve these games in a high-dimensional settings. So when we come with a simulation-based and learning-based algorithm, we can do nice things. Okay, so as a take-home message in just 2 points, and take-home messages are easy because you're already at home. So first thing, if you're able to solve a min-field game and you take the optimal policy, you plug it in the end player game, well, you are very, very close to a Nash. So it's very good news. And second thing, we are able to get some approximate Nash equilibrium, but we are also able to get solutions of similar problems when you do min-field control, where you control everybody. And I think there can be some nice applications of this, and would be happy to discuss them further with some of you which are interested. Thanks a lot. I will stop there. So it's a bit long.
No, it was perfect, Ramiel. Thanks so much. Everyone, let's thank Ramiel for the great talk. Lots of great questions as well from the audience. We actually have a few minutes left. If there are questions, feel free to ask.
Maybe a very practical one, but if we want to play with multi-agent, with the min-field learning part, is there any library available or something online, or maybe just a K-paper we could look at for implementing these things?
Oh, if you want to, so no, there is not. I mean, there are some on GitHub. You can find a couple of things, but I believe that something is missing, which would be something which allows people to play with these kind of games and try to optimize the algorithm on it. And I hope typically that we'll be able at some point to add up min-field games to OpenSpiel library to connect with what you saw yesterday. So let's see if we can do it, but it's on our to-do list at some point.
Thank you. Thanks.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I can ask one more. I could ask many, but probably I should also try and take some offline with Romuald. But yeah, so in how far have people, I guess, tried to now also consider individual properties of or preferences of agents in this framework? Because if I understand correctly, it's built on the fact that it's really a symmetric game in a sense, right? So all the agents have the same preferences.
Yes.
Have any extensions been considered in this respect?
Yes, thanks. It's a very important question. So yes, there are. So all the agents are the same, but yeah, typically they don't start from the same position. Okay, so this is one of the differences at the beginning. And if you think, for example, you are on the financial market and you have people which are more or less risk adverse. So let's say you think there are very risk adverse people and people which are not so risk adverse. So if you want to tackle this using min-field games, there are different ways to do so. One way would be to say, okay, let's focus on a multi-population min-field games. With one population are the risky guys and the other one are the risk adverse guys. And I have two populations who are going to interact. So it's one way to do so. Another way to do it is to say, okay, let's say I have a distribution of risk aversion over the population. I don't know who is who, but when I pick a random guy, my representative agent, I pick for him as well a random risk aversion, like I pick a random position somehow. So I pick this, and it's not dynamic, it remains constant. So when you look at the partial differential equations, it's not so good news. So it's harder to get fixed point on these kind of things from a PD point of view. So from a numerical resolution of partial differential equation is bad news as well. But from a simulation point of view, you can do lots of things. But yeah, getting uniqueness of Nash is trickier here. So there are some results which are not perfect, but there are some.
Yeah. All right. Now that's very interesting. Yeah, I'm very interested to try and talk at a later point. Yeah. I think there's a very strong link to some of the work that I've been doing on this influence-based abstraction, which also tries to essentially summarize how an agent is being influenced. We pursued this really on the, I'll say, few agent perspective, but it seems that there's a lot of alignment there. So it would be interesting to talk about that.
With great pleasure.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, no, thanks for the talk. It's really interesting.
Thanks for the invitation.
May I have a small question? Please, thank you very much for the talk. I was glad to hear all this. I come from the multi-agent, a few agents perspective. So when you were talking about n becoming very large, tending to infinite, I understand that you are thinking about kind of fluid things, but do you have a rule of thumb or any intuition for us to take home also, in the sense that when does it make sense to talk about the distribution of the population instead of the individual agents? Do you have any intuition to share with us? Like, when does it make sense to change from one paradigm to the other? Or is there any transition, or how you envision the relationship between individual taking care of individual actions and just looking for the distribution of the rest of the population?
Yeah, it's a good question. I have to admit I don't have a good answer for this, but it's very important indeed to understand when should you go to this to a phase where it makes more sense to look at the limit. And from a practical point of view, I would say, well, when you cannot solve the problem because you have too many agents, it's worth it to try it, definitely. So what's happening is that you have somehow, so the agents would be the equivalent of particle in statistical physics. So this comes from statistical physics, I should have said it, where you have all the particles and you don't look at each particle, you look at the distribution of them. And in this example, well, they don't need that many particles to have some nice output from this representation. So I would say it's worth it to try. But yeah, I don't have a perfect answer, and it would be definitely quite interesting to see. You take the main field, you put it in a 50-player game, in a 25, in a 20, in a 10, in a 5. How bad are you? It makes me think we should try that. Thanks for your question.
Thank you.
And sorry again, it's getting late.
No, actually, I took up a few minutes at the beginning with the introduction, so this is perfect. Thanks, everyone, for all the great questions. If you have any additional questions, Romuald, is it okay if folks reach out to you directly later?
My pleasure.
Fantastic.